In 2006, when the war in Iraq was not going very well from the point of view of the United States and from the point of view of President Bush, who wanted a victory, he sought out a go-between, somebody who could make a trip out to the war front and come back and tell him whether victory was possible and how. The person he chose is our first panelist tonight, retired four-star General Jack Keane, who made those trips to Iraq and came back convinced that a surge was the way to go.
It's always great to be back in my hometown, New York City. I don't need much excuse to come here. I love this place, even though I spent most of my adult life in other places. But it always has been home, even though I don't live here. I live in Washington, D.C. I come here for the Metropolitan Opera and my beloved Yankees. I know I probably alienated half of the audience now. I'm not supposed to do that. But I'm delighted to be here, and obviously this is an important subject and one that Fred and I have been very much involved in for a couple of years. My involvement in Iraq goes back to 2003 when I was on active duty, and I visited Iraq right after the invasion. And shortly left active duty, I joined Secretary Rumsfeld's policy board at his request with Henry Kissinger and Newt Gingrich and Tom Foley and Frederick Clay, a bunch of others. And Iraq became an increasingly more important subject for us as the war unfolded before our eyes and the challenges that we were facing. In 2006, I parted company with the administration and the Pentagon over the war in Iraq because I believed our strategy was failing. I took that message to Secretary Rumsfeld and also to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Peter Pace, and had devised a new strategy to help promulgate that. While I was in the throes of developing that strategy, I met Fred Kagan over at the AEI Institute, and he put together a planning group that was looking at the war and a new strategy, and we found that our ideas were exactly the same. And eventually, with others, and I may say others, that had some influence on the President of the United States to admit that the strategy was failing and it needed to be changed. I tell you that because I knew what failure looked like, and I think so did you. And I also know what the word winning or success looks like in Iraq. It's been a stunning achievement in Iraq, somewhat unprecedented in the history of counterinsurgency warfare, for such a dramatic turnaround in such a short period of time. And that stunning achievement, you're generally familiar with it, but it's based certainly on a new strategy, but it's also based on the premise that security was a necessary precondition for political and economic progress. We had never had that as a staple before. We tried to do it complementary among those three issues, and that blew up and failed. That's the reality of it. So we had to get security if we're going to make political progress, and that is a stunning achievement in such a short period of time. Zero ethno-sectarian violence, all of the violence dramatically down 60 or 80%, depending on the category. I won't go into the details of all of that. Some of you are familiar with it, but it's quite remarkable. Most of the time that when we go to Iraq every few months, about every 3 months for 2 weeks at a time, we spend most of our time with the Iraqi people, out on the streets where they are, in the schools, in their hospitals, seeing what life was like. In 2006, no children going to schools, hundreds of people being killed every week, people not going to their jobs, only going to marketplaces to seek provisions on an emergency basis, terrorized and intimidated, a country fracturing, heading towards civil war. It was not a civil war, and a possibly failed state. The conditions in Iraq today, and gradually improving over 2007 and 2008, are a dramatic difference. Schools, all schools are open in Iraq, primary, secondary, and 27 colleges, universities, and technical colleges that they have in Iraq. The marketplaces are teeming. There's a social fabric in Iraq that's taking place in the evening or on the days off where people are visiting zoos and what's left of museums. And the natural rhythm of life is returning to the people of Iraq. Iraq is all about its people, in my judgment, so that is why we spend so much time understanding what happened to them and what is now happening to them. And it's fascinating to see The security situation dramatically improved because the mainstream Sunni insurgents who started the war have capitulated. They have surrendered. They are coming into the political process to achieve their political objectives. And that is a dramatic turnaround, and that's how insurgencies end when they walk away and leave the field of battle, or they come into the political process. The al-Qaeda have been operationally defeated. They no longer threaten the legitimacy of the regime. They cannot mount a sustained campaign to do that. They don't have the infrastructure and networks to do it. Shia extremism has had a major setback supported by the Iranians, and as time appears to be playing out for us, it appears that it's going to be a major defeat as well. The impact on the political process is extraordinary. There's a rising political class in Iraq that we have seen. Every place you go in Iraq, people are interested in the political process, participating in it. There are 500 plus parties in Iraq. I mean, we struggle with these two that we have, to say the least. Can you imagine what it's like? The youth in Iraq, and we've attended some of their party meetings, it's wonderful to see their energy and their motivation to participate in something that's all new to them, a fledgling democracy. It's fascinating to see this taking hold in Iraq. The national legislative benchmarks, 18 of them have been, only one out of the 18 has not succeeded, and that is really quite dramatic. The political reconciliation that has taken place in Iraq is very real. The most recent one is the provincial election law, which will redefine Iraq. It is a seminal event. Power will be shared and diffused in the provinces. The people will get better services as a result of it. They will have their own budgets. They will have a place to go to express their grievances and their needs. Iraq will never be the same again as a result of what is going to take place in January of this year. Less than 3 years after this government took power, as inefficient as it has been at times and ineffective as it has been at times, when you draw back from it, it has been a remarkable movement towards what the premise is here. Success in Iraq for them, and success in Iraq for us.